Welcome along. This is one of a series of webinars that Panalysis has been providing over the past few months. Now, we've done a lot of work for universities over the past 11 years of this company's life, and what I'm hoping to share with you today is a bit of insight of some of the things that I think are important for education providers to become not only familiar with the tools that we have at hand to promote our various universities, TAFEs, etc., but also to put this into a structure by which we can start to learn about the people that we're trying to reach out to, and importantly to determine whether we're successful in doing so. So just a little bit about me. I've been working in this industry for over 16 years. I've kind of been around with the web when it kicked off in the mid-90s. And I grew into a role quite quickly at the University of New South Wales, where I was the web coordinator there for about 4.5 years before I departed to join the commercial community in the .com frenzy that followed up on that. Now, I've also been in this business for 11 years, and during that time we've seen a lot of changes, but probably one of the most significant that I think has occurred in that period of time is the arrival of a tool called Google Analytics. Now, I'm sure we're all familiar with that. That's a tool that I'm almost certain we will have come across. But what that has done is it's changed the landscape from one where we can be undertaking our marketing based on faith to one where we can gather evidence to see what the decisions that we're making and the activities that we're doing as to how they impact our outcomes in a positive or negative way. Now, I've also got quite a lot of experience in the analytics field as well, in terms of taking data and helping people to make sense of it and to allow them to drill into that data to help them make informed decisions. Now, Panalysis are experts in this area, and we have covered a lot of areas with government, education, insurance, some of the areas we've specialised in. And we've worked for quite a lot of people in the university sector on a number of different levels. So a little bit of a bragging sheet with our logos here of some of our signature clients. With Deakin University, we've been working closely with them for the past, 4, 5, 6 years. I'm not sure, actually, I've lost count. They've been one of our longest clients. We have helped them on a number of levels early on to implement the ClickTracks application, to measure their site in the early days, and later with Urchin, and now with the transition that they're making to Google Analytics. Also, the University of New South Wales, we've helped out with them on a number of levels, and one of which is the Master of Business Technology program. They've been a client of ours again for a very long time, one of our very first clients, in fact, that have stayed with us for the duration. We've also worked with the University of Sydney with implementing the Urchin software with them and architecting a solution that provided a mini Google Analytics application within the university. And we've also done substantial work with Curtin in tracking the the Box Online, a social media application that they released a few years ago, and also on a casual basis from there with other applications that they've sought to measure online. Now, aside from that, we also do a lot of work in government. So Australian Bureau of Statistics, Centrelink and Vic Roads, again, long-term relationships with those guys, and we very much understand how to analyse complex data across big websites. Now, the decision for a person to engage in study is probably one of the most complex decisions that they're going to make in their life, because it impacts so many things. It impacts their career, it impacts their I suppose, the next few years of their life. It impacts what they may earn in the future. It impacts on what they may elect to do later in life. Now, the problem, of course, is, and this is a very interesting piece of research that was done by a marketing company in Melbourne, where Tim Winkler interviewed 1,000 current students to ascertain a number of things to do with social media, and I'll come back to some of his findings later in the talk. But really, the key takeaway from this is that not everybody actually managed to find out what it is that they needed to know before they enrolled in university. In fact, out of the study, 1 in 3 people, one of these 3 students, felt uninformed in their decision. Now, this is interesting because it's a very complex process that we have to go through, and there is lots of information and lots of weighing up of various aspects of the decision that we need to go through with the students to ensure that they can make an informed choice as to the right decision for them. So this little word cloud, and those of you that haven't seen this is becoming quite common now, but this is generated by a tool called Wordle. If you just Google Wordle, you'll find it, and you can paste in a block of text and it will generate a little tag cloud based on the frequency count of the text, of the words in that text. And this slide here, what this is showing is a literature review of a number of academic studies from the late 70s through to now about what are the impacts upon the student's decision to study. And what leaps out is across each of those is the quality, the reputation, the academic reputation of the university is paramount, and then subsequently costs, availability, the proximity, etc., appear to be secondary concerns. And that was backed up in the research that I'd read leading up to this talk. So how do we influence this person and people like her to make an informed decision about to embark on study with our institution or to join a short course or whatever it is that might be? How can we influence this person, particularly in the digital space? Well, we have so many tools at our disposal these days. It's very, very difficult to know exactly where to start. We've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, we've got search, we've got a seemingly endless number of various ways that we can reach people. And hopefully an increasing number of ways that we can listen to their responses and to listen to what they have to say and to listen to their needs. But it is bewildering. There is no simple answer to how we can draw all this together. And unlike where we've come from with university and education marketing, where it was simply a matter of advertising our offerings, making sure we appeared in the media, that our academics appeared to be credible and in the public, and we invited people to information evenings, that is certainly becoming, well, still a critical part of the process, but it's certainly becoming a smaller part of the process as the various other channels that we engage with our potential students expand. Now, it is complicated, and I don't think there's any getting away from this. And what I'm hoping to do today is to take this as a bit of a roadmap and try and map in our digital activities into this decision-making process that Kotler and Fox forwarded in an article that they wrote back in 1985 and subsequently updated. So it's become a bit of a central point in the research that I have read at the academic literature about how do students make decisions. And this is similar to what I've seen in other aspects of life, where people are trying to evaluate whether they purchase one car or another, one TV or another, etc. So complicated decisions that require a lot of input and a lot of consideration have many different factors in there. And there is no one simple thing that we can do that will cause somebody to make the decision. There are many, many factors that are involved. So let's have a bit of a look at some of those factors. And another academic study that I found that was quite valuable was one that was done by a Portuguese pair of academics who took a study of a number of students and tried to ascertain the impact of the university's image and the perceived value of that university upon the decision-making process. Now, this is a great paper and quite an informative one. Yes, it is based in Portugal, but I think that the learnings and the takeaway are definitely applicable to Australia. So if we look at the model that they've forwarded here, is that they've proposed that image, that student expectations and the technical quality, the functional quality and the perceived value impacted satisfaction, which impacted the propensity for a student to enrol in that particular course and to recommend that to themselves, to recommend it to their friends by passing that on via word of mouth. The reality, however, once they had analysed the results of this study, was that they found that the influencing factors were variable, that some of their theories were not supported in the research and the evidence, and others were, and there were a few that emerged that were not expected. So the first thing, this is a complicated diagram, so let me just step through it so I can explain things one at a time. So the image of the university had an almost 60% influence. So we're looking at the variations. So as people's perception of the image went up, their expectations of what they could gather from that university also went up. So 60% or 57% of that variance of expectations was influenced by the perceived image of that university. 85% of that impacted the perception of quality. So again, these two areas here are really telling us about the brand side of things. So we're trying to set the image in terms of building the brand, and they're very heavily influencing perceptions of expectation and quality. Again, with value, we're seeing a high degree of correlation there in terms of the impact and variance. Satisfaction, lesser so, but still important. Much lower than was anticipated, that the difference between image and word of mouth, but only a far smaller amount, half of what it impacted on the other variables. The notion of value to satisfaction, a bit higher, but still in the lower end of the spectrum. And interestingly, the relationship between the loyalty of people that had actually completed the degree and the outcome by word of mouth. Now, it wasn't necessarily satisfaction, but rather it was loyalty that made that transition occur. So their hypothesis of the satisfaction leading to word of mouth was not proved in the evidence. In this study, there were 2,687 students interviewed, and the results were compiled into this and analysed in a formal modelling application to determine these relationships. It is an interesting study. It's in the International Journal of Education Management, and I would encourage those that are interested in understanding more the theory and the evidence behind all this to pursue this, because it was, I believe, a very influential article. Now let's get back to something a bit more practical for today, because I know that this is not all about the theory and we don't all need academic lectures here. I'm sure you get a bit of that back in the office. So what do we do with this plethora of tools and widgets and channels that we have available to us to act on? Well, the very first thing that we need to do is to make sure that we've got a measurement system in place. And I did a lot of research in preparing this talk. I mean, I focused on the university sector, but I know that there are others on this talk in the audience that are not from the university sector, from TAFE and from private colleges, etc. Now, I focused on the university sector because it's one that I know well, but I also think that it's generalisable to other sectors of the education market, where any of the decisions that we're asking our prospective students to make are more complex and more involved. It has some degree of overlap with the short course market, but this is primarily, I suppose, the theme of today is on the longer, bigger picture type courses that involve a lot more effort on the people that are participating in them. Now, Google Analytics, it hit the road about 2006, and since then has gone from strength to strength to strength. It is a tool that enables us to do tremendous amount of analysis and deep diving into the data to try and draw from that insights that can help us make a difference. But unfortunately, to most people that use Google Analytics, little more is used of this tool other than basic facts such as the number of visits, page views, top content accessed, keywords accessed, etc. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail today. This is a much more a higher level talk about strategy and bringing this together as a big picture. But we will be running more webinars on how to use Google Analytics in an in-depth circumstance, both in the education sector as well as in other sectors. So I'd encourage you to keep in contact with us in our newsletter. I know a number of you have joined our newsletter recently. We will be advertising from those and, of course, on our website from time to time. Now, the very good news, the very pleasing news that I found when I started preparing for this talk is I could not find a single university in the 41 that I examined here. I know that there are more than 41. There are colleges and stuff that I haven't included there, but the major universities in Australia were all covered. Not a single one of those did not have an adequate measurement tool. In fact, quite a number of them had multiple tools in place. and the predominant one being Google Analytics, which makes sense. It's free, it's an enterprise quality tool, and it's very applicable to the university sector. A number of others have used the Urchin application, which is the version of Google Analytics that you can own and install. Unfortunately, Google have discontinued sales on that this week, so it's not a product that is now available for purchase, but it is an excellent product, and for those that are using it, I know a number of them are retaining that for the future. Interestingly, there was only one university that I came across that is using the Omniture application or platform. Now, I often get asked, because Omniture is quite a well-respected tool, should they convert from Google Analytics to Omniture or to WebTrends or some of the other tools? And my answer is universally, well, if you hit the wall with Google Analytics and you can't answer the question there, it might be that you can answer the question in Omniture, but in most cases, that's really the finer detail that would be why you would go there. So if for instance, Omniture does something in a particular way that you need it done, then we could go there. But really, they are almost, and I would argue, in 99% of cases, going to offer the same value. So save the money on the tool and spend it on the people to use to analyse that tool. Now, the other applications that people have used, so there's many out there where people are using tools such as ClickTail, where we're recording visitor sessions and playing them back, or there's heat mapping applications, or tools that we can use to track clicks on how many people like an application, etc., etc. So there's a few others out there, but they're in the minority and have individual and specific needs. Okay, so let's have a look at search engines. Now, in looking at our roadmap that I've painted here from Kotler and Fox back in 1985, I think search engines map into these areas. That we're looking for people at the awareness phase. Now, naturally, we can't really influence their need arousal, because, I mean, that's far deeper, and the choice to study may be that I'm leaving school and I need to get a better career, and we know that a university degree is becoming almost obligatory in life these days. We can't influence that heavily, but what we can influence is placing the university or the TAFE or the provider in front of that particular person when they embark upon that journey to find people that, or find institutions that can satisfy their requirements. So search is quite an important part of this, in that it is a way that people can determine whether we have what they want and are looking for. If I'm searching for a nursing degree, who offers a nursing degree? Where can I do it? Who is closest? What are the reputations of those organisations? All fall into this category of search engines. Now, the formation of the evaluation set means that basically that's the shortlist. We want our institutions to be in that shortlist because we offer a degree that is matching this particular user's needs, or we have something that is likely to do so. It is also, as the journey of these people progress, important that we help them to build their evaluation criteria. So what is it that is going to help them select one degree over another? Is it proximity? Is it the fact that the university is close to home? Or is it to do with the costs associated with that? Lesser of an issue with undergraduate study in Australia, but more of an issue with postgraduate study later on. Or how can we help them to evaluate those alternatives, and how will they use search engines to do that? Now, I'd like to show you in a moment some search queries that we can look at in depth to see how we can understand the user's search behaviour. But in summary, it's really about awareness and shortlisting. Who offers, how do I get into, and what can I get for my ATAR if I embark upon this course? So let's just have a look at some searches that I have dug out of a very large data set. Now, back in 2006, AOL had a bit of a lapse of judgment, let me put it that way. One of their people there released the searches for about 500,000 individual users from the AOL search engine, and that data set still circulates around the internet today. Now, I found that very important in terms of understanding how people search over time. And what I'd like to do is to show you a little bit about how we can use that data to understand what people do when they engage with search engines. Now, at the very first, I'm going to show you a sequence of searches by somebody that was apparently looking to get into medical college. Now, whilst this data is 6 years old, I still think it's as valid today because I don't believe that users of search engines, their behaviour has changed significantly from what I've examined in the data that I'm seeing now. Now, this particular user's journey started off with a generic search about college information. Now, again, this is an American database, so it's all very American in the approach, so there's not a lot of Australian data here, but it is, again, I think quite applicable to our market today. They've progressed through to looking at things like the College Board, pre-medicine college program, accelerated medicine program, and then they start to look at individual universities. So they're beginning to sort of shop around and understand who is offering this particular approach with getting into a pre-medicine program. Now, the interesting thing is that they are certainly casting a fairly wide net from George Washington University to Albany to Tufts to the University of Rochester. A lot of brand search going on down here, and as it continues through, you can see there's a lot of evaluation of separate colleges and programs. Now, also take note of the dates that are involved. So this started on the 2nd of March. And as we proceed through over the weeks, we can start to see the searches are fairly consistent in that about once every few days this person is coming back and searching. And now we're getting into April and again coming back to the universities, refining them, looking at the same problem with the medical programs, starting to look for evaluation type sites. And I'll come back to this later on. So what are the top medical schools? Who's rated those schools? Coming down further, we can start to see more universities. We're even looking as far away as Miami and New York, so people are obviously prepared to travel for the right university in this case. Back to rankings and best colleges, etc., and then back to some brands there, and ending up in May. Now that's unfortunate because the data stops at that point, and I would anticipate that this could have gone on for several more months before this person had made a decision. Another one is a student that is looking to study ergonomics and their journey through their transition from one to the other. So they're starting off in New York with one of the New York universities. They're looking at general searches regarding that area of interest, human factors and psychology, starting to talk about individual universities, a little bit about the careers coming in there. And they're looking as far away as Kansas, New Mexico, Cincinnati, New York. And this is fascinating because it starts to give us an insight of the processes that people go through to understand how they can make a decision and at what point that decision is being made. And as we progress through these, we're starting to see that it's a hopping in and out. So there's a constant recycling of who offers this degree. Can I get another one on the shortlist? Who am I looking for? What is it? We don't have a lot of insight to what they did on these sites, but the sequence that we're seeing here is fairly clearly telling me it's a cyclic process by people returning to their task. In this case, they've switched to architecture. Is architecture better than human factors? Maybe that's more their interest than the other. We can see a little bit of evidence to support that. Back to the individual colleges again, and then transferring back there, and then back to psychology. And this can go on and on and on. There's many, many different stories in this data, and I won't harp on about it, but the thing that I wanted to leave as a takeaway is that we can start to learn about the processes of how people undertake this sort of research from this type of data. Okay, so back to my presentation. Now, the unfortunate thing is that search is often not done well. Now, in this instance here, I'm picking on people, so I do apologise. If there's anybody in the audiences from these organisations, I do apologise in advance. I don't mean to single you out, but what I do see time and time again, particularly with this aspect of paid search, is just how poorly thought through it is by the agencies that execute this. So what I've done here is I've done a search for architecture course, and we have been presented with an ad for design courses. And I thought, okay, architecture design, there's probably a good correlation there. Let's have a look at what they've got to offer. And if I click on that link to go to the next one, I'm actually taken to a page of gardening and landscape courses. So A, it's not architecture, but B, it's also not design. If I come back there, it's not design courses at all. It is gardening courses. So I've set up a fundamental disjoint or disconnect between what I've asked for and what I've been given. If we look at other ones that are closer to our own home, the University of New England. I typed in architecture degree. The University of New England had placed an ad there, probably their agency, I'd argue, not the university itself. But when I click on that ad and have actually look on their site, after I did finally get to the point where I could determine whether architecture courses were there, they actually do not offer architecture. And again, so we've set up a disconnect between I've said in architecture, I've received an ad for distance education, and I'm taken to the site and I'm frustrated because I don't offer it. So it not only wastes money in terms of we're paying Google for the privilege of that click, but it also sets up a dynamic which may devalue the user's experience and hence perhaps provide some form of negative connotation to the university. It's not going to be a showstopper, but it's certainly one that I would argue is worth removing for a small amount of effort. Now, website is, I know social media is probably the bee's knees now. It seems to be the sexy part of everything. We're all doing Facebook and Twitter and so forth. But the website is still fundamentally important. The data that I've seen is that the website is one of the key factors in the decision-making process. Now, because universities are large, complex beasts, it is very difficult for us to do a perfect job with the web. But as you can see from my slide here, I believe the web impacts virtually every aspect of the decision-making process for a student to decide to enroll in the university. So if we have a look at what I would consider an excellent case is Curtin University. Now, before I got that little blurb there, just to move perspective along to make an informed decision. Now, Curtin University, my slides can keep up with me, I think are doing a fantastic job with the way that they are streamlining the user's experience. So if we go to their homepage of the website, it's very clearly focused on the future student. There's a lot of information to assist with the branding, and this is a fairly common theme in most sites at the moment. There's obviously themes moved through the universities because we do tend to look at one another in our decisions to change things like web design. But if I click on that, start typing into that courses page there, I get a drop-down menu that enables me to quickly identify the degrees that are offered based on what I'm typing. I can click through on that to see the search results, and very clear and lots of white space. They're very clearly saying that nursing is available. If I click on the search links, I have a lot of information at my fingertips. This is a very long page. I suppose if there's a criticism I was to make of this is that it doesn't necessarily encourage people to scroll down, but I think that's a minor point. It's clearly indicating its TER or the ATAR score that is necessary. And when we scroll down the page there's supporting information. There's videos of students. There's even a link to a career opportunities. And we can even go into further information beyond this if we wish to. Now, the sad thing about this, and I mean this in the best possible way, is that we're not tracking any of this. The interactions that the users are making on these pages is not captured. Like, I've looked at the Google Analytics data that's flowing back to Curtin University, and unfortunately there's not being followed through. There's not a lot of, we can't count the clicks. We don't know how many people have opened up the career planner. We don't know how many people have played that video. And again, this is a universal criticism. I don't mean to single Curtin out. In all the university cases that I'd identified, bar a few, these types of interactions are not being captured into Google Analytics. And I think that's fundamental because we're losing information that helps us to understand how the user is interacting with our site and what the quality of their experience is. And I'll come back to that a little bit later in the talk. There's also this great one, I really like this, was the university spendometer. The downside of this was there was a big you use this with your own caution up front, which took away from the experience, but I know that we have to cover our butts in this regards. We can't allow things to be done which are going to damage us. But it was interesting, and I do encourage you to have a look at it. I kind of thought it was quite a useful little application. Now, comparison sites. Now, this is, coming back to those searches that I was looking at before, it's quite clear that there's a very distinct need for independent comparative information, such as is provided by companies like Hobson's with the Good Universities Guides. these do appear to play a significant role in the decision-making process. And I've kind of isolated the areas I believe it impacts into the information search, so who offers what, the shortlisting, the formulation of the evaluation set, evaluating the alternatives, also the influence of others. So being a third party, it is an external factor. It is about the influence of their opinion upon the decision-making process. And so we do find that the Good Universities Guide, I would say, is instrumental, and one of those ones. There are many, of course, but it's certainly those external sites where we do have the universities being independently critiqued and judgments placed on them to be quite valuable. And I think with social media, we'll start to see this as an increasing area of need where we're seeing a lot more interaction at this point. Now, event marketing is kind of very well known to universities, and we run an event, we recruit for it, and we hope people will turn up, and we can encourage them to join our program. And I see this as fitting into the evaluation of alternatives, development of evaluation criteria. We obviously get a chance to influence them, so they're in the other's influence, and ultimately in the decision that they make. But it's later in the piece, so we've got to get through those other earlier phases so that we can actually get them to consider the university or the degree or the course that we're wanting to offer them. Now, here's the University of New South Wales. I'm trying to balance it out. I want to mix it up a bit. I mean, I've just picked a lot of cases here. There's many I could go into. But the Postgraduate Expo that's coming up there, they've got an offer. They've got a Director of Engineering from Twitter. That's a kind of good little ploy they've got to kind of consolidate that, that there is value in doing a degree from this organisation. And if we click on the register button, we're taken to a form that we can complete, and then when we go through and complete that, we can see that we've gone through that whole process and we're registered. But again, it's not measured. And if we come back to this form, we can understand by slicing and dicing the data which interests are people most likely coming for, which areas they're most likely coming from. We can start to do further analysis. And if we were to embellish this form a little bit more, we could gather other data that might also help to understand the potential of this particular person to come to the site. We could also bundle with this form things like the number of visits that they have made to the website prior to completing this, and what campaign they came from, what search keywords, and many other factors. Now, one that you might not be familiar with, and certainly is worth considering, is remarketing. And this is a newish concept that's been around for the last couple of years, but really hitting the awareness of the general market at this point. Now, I'll come back to what remarketing is at the moment, but as you can see, it's one where I think we can cover a lot of bases because it helps to remind the prospective students of the offers that we've got to make, so that we're uppermost in mind as the decision-making process progresses. Now, what happens with remarketing? Well, let's take this scenario, and this is a real one. We actually use this company, their services, but and that's why I know it happens, because I see their ads everywhere. But let's say I'm in the need of an answering service. So I type in answering service into Google, and I click through to the Office HQ website. They make I see their website, but I don't buy anything at this point. I've kind of just browsed by, and I've then gone on my merry way. But later on, as I start to move through the web, I start to see their ads. And ironically, SAS, the analytics ad there, and this Subaru are also sites that I've been to that use remarketing. And when I say everywhere on the web, I mean everywhere. Everywhere I go, these ads are following me. It just seems to go on and on and on. And I won't go too many more cases of this, but pretty much any site that is using the Google Display Network will now display these ads to me. I think they've overdone it. I think we need to be a little bit less aggressive than these companies are being. But it is another way that we can continue to remind the visitor that we are here, we are in the consideration, and to build brand over a period of time. Now, this is all done, in this case, through the AdWords service and the AdWords network, and it's not a terribly difficult thing to set up. It's one of those things that we do this for our customers in terms of designing these sorts of campaigns, but it's one you could easily do yourself or through an existing agency if you elected to. Now, let's come back to social media, and I expect that when I put forward this concept of doing this talk, and some of you registered, that you would expect me to cover social media, and I would argue that that's a reasonable thing. It is obviously becoming a fairly significant part of the digital marketing landscape. And the universities, looking at the research that I've done, most of them are engaging in the social media space in some way, from small toes in the water to fairly significant investment. Now, where do I see that this coming through? Now, I think there's a part of this is about the need arousal. So what are a person's peers doing? That's not something we can control, however, but it's certainly a part of this social media landscape, and the influence that a word of mouth decision may make on a prospective student could be significant. But it also can impact the motivation and values of why somebody is coming to a particular organisation based on interactions between themselves and their peers. It also helps to influence them, but really from the university's perspective, in terms of the outward social media, it's a far lesser influence, I believe, than perhaps we're giving it credit for. But also importantly, I think that the social media fits in the post-purchase. After the student has enrolled, there is an opportunity for us to leverage social media in that area and for them to assist us in our goal of promoting our courses beyond the immediate social sphere. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the providers that we've got available to us. We know that there's Twitter, of course. Most of the universities are using Twitter. Facebook, all universities had a Facebook page, and I'll come back to that in a moment. I didn't examine a lot of these in terribly much depth, but LinkedIn is certainly a predominant one. There's a lot of universities have LinkedIn pages, but few of them are actually using it as an outreach mechanism, which I think is an opportunity, particularly for the postgraduate market. And there's newer ones such as the Google Plus and Pinterest. Pinterest is an interesting site, no pun intended, but that allows people to set up pin boards for various themes. And there's a lot of activity going on in the US with universities in the Pinterest. If you just Google Pinterest and university, you should see a number of providers out there that could be used as case studies. Now, out of the studies that we did, Facebook, we had 29 out of the 41 universities having a Facebook page, where I said having a Facebook page, that everybody has one because they've got them from the default Wikipedia, but there were 29 that had taken the trouble to do something with it. So they customised it in some way, but they like at least had posts there and images, etc. But for those that significantly customised it, there were far fewer. So those people that had actually taken the time to embed something like an ATAR calculator or something useful other than just simply having the wall and a few photos, only 15 universities were currently doing that at this point. Now, if we were to take the idea of the Facebook alike, so where people click on the like button to express an interest in us, and if we took that as the benchmark of what we want to achieve, a little bit of correlation shows us that customizing your web page, or your Facebook page, sorry, has a significant impact on whether somebody is actually going to like your site or your offer online. So those that took the trouble to customize their site, they were averaging 17,000 likes compared to the 7,000 for those that did not customize their page. So this does kind of give us some degree of certainty that putting effort into the Facebook avenue is going to generate some returns, but what the value of a like is, I couldn't say at this point. It has to be thrown into the mix and it has to be analysed and evaluated. But it is certainly something that I think that if you are going to go into Facebook, we do need to go into it in a moderately significant way. Now, there's also some cases against this and some studies that have been done. Unfortunately, both these studies that they didn't release the details of the study, so I couldn't go through and say whether I thought it was a valid study or not by examining the methodologies. I'd like to. But there's one that was done for the Times Higher Education supplement in the UK, and they said that there was only the students' recommendations by friends and the institution's website were significant, but only 40% of them were using social media to select it. Now, I think that the question may be misphrased there, because using social media to select the university, I think, is the key phrase. Using social media to influence the decision making, I think, is far more important, and that, I think, comes down to the recommendations by friends category rather than the decision making process itself. And additionally, that study by Tim Winkler that I mentioned before, only 0.9% of universities rated their Facebook page as a significant influence over their choice. Well, I don't agree with this, because it's not having the Facebook page is not going to influence the decision, but it will influence the perception of the university. And I think it's kind of essential that we treat that separately, because the Facebook and other social media channels is not a way of closing the deal, but rather a way of setting the scene for that deal to be closed via other avenues. I'll be interested if there's opinions on that later on, if anybody would like to chat with me privately. Now, if we look at these sites, now Pinterest, as I said there, this is a growing one. Might be interesting to do this. This data, by the way, comes out of the Google Ad Planner application. You can just Google Ad Planner and you'll get there. If you've got a Google account, you can log in and see it. And we can see there in Australia, we've had a recent growth in these past few months of people using Pinterest, but really we're talking about 50,000 visits a day at this point. And that, whilst that sounds like a lot, if we can compare that to Facebook, where we're talking about many millions of visits per day, there's several orders of magnitude greater than same for Twitter in terms of number of daily visits coming through there. I won't spend a lot of time on this data, but the Google Ad Planner data is a rich source, and to kind of catch up on a bit of time, we'll just kind of skip through that at the moment. Another channel that I think is perhaps undervalued in this area in social media is iTunes. And iTunes University is, I think, particularly for the postgraduate market, could potentially have quite a significant influence on the decision that a student may take to join a university. Now, out of the many universities that we examined, there were a number of Australian universities that have this, but I'm not sure what the threshold is and so forth, but initial indications do look like it's certainly a valid approach to encouraging people to perceive the university as high quality, reputable, and exposing what the experience is likely to be of their lectures and so forth after they decide to enrol. Okay, so having all these avenues to play in is certainly fine, but we really need some way of evaluating which of these is actually doing the work for us and which of them is generating the outcome. And I think that the key part that I'd like to discuss with you today is about how can we use Google Analytics to evaluate our marketing activities and to help get the mix right. Now, we did some work for the Deakin University team in December with the change of preference campaign. I know it's all a race when that happens. Everybody's after everybody in the undergraduate local domestic student market to switch their university preferences so we get a chance of grabbing them in that second round. But it's not an easy process to go through, and there's certainly not a direct conversion that we can attribute to it. So we can't say that if somebody downloaded a PDF or completed a form that was the closing of the deal. It's far more complex than that. So what we proposed to Deakin was to start to measure how students progress through from being kind of disinterested to consideration to their decision that they were likely to proceed. Now, we couldn't say this with any certainty because we can't go and log into VTAC and join our Google AdWords campaigns and our Facebook campaigns, etc., through to the VTAC database. I'd love to do it, but it's not possible. So what we did is we decided to build a model that helped classify each of the visitors from the campaigns into these different groupings. So we had those that were low engaged, those that were medium engaged, medium high engaged, and high engaged visitors. And for each of the campaigns that they ran during that period of time, we assessed each of the visitors based on their behaviour into these four groups. And so for every campaign that was run, we can produce a matrix that shows the ratio of these individuals coming to the site from that particular campaign. We did that by looking at grading the various activities that users could do on the website. So we tracked whether they clicked on a live video chat. We tracked whether they went and logged into the ATAR calculator. We tracked whether there were frequently asked questions being interacted with. We looked at what they typed into the ATAR calculator, and all of these were put into a mix that we used to assess the visitor against the criteria that we had there, which was, did they fall into one of those four groups? And also, there were Facebook pages involved, so people moving over here and also interacting there that we were looking at during that process, as well as other areas such as the live video chat. that occurred later on. So registrations for this also gave them scores that we used into the mix in terms of assessing whether that visitor was engaged or not. Now, by the way, this in some subsequent analysis, I won't disclose details, of course, but the text that people type into these live chats is a very rich area for mining with text analysis to find out what the sort of themes are that people are, engaging with, and the questions that they have with the university, so that we can better refine what we're doing online. So the result of this was really that we built the foundations for a program which gives Deakin greater understanding of the impacts of their campaigns across a range of channels for the change of preferences period, deeper insight as to what worked and what didn't, and understanding the factors that influence the visitor's behaviour on the site. Now, because this is a very quick campaign that occurs, that those learnings will be applied in the years to come, not necessarily on refining the campaign. So there's a deep analysis that needs to be done yet to take this and embed it into next year's campaign, which we'll be doing at a later date. So at the end of this, to sum up, that whilst we have all these tools at our disposal, the key of this is to make sure that we put them into a planned measurement system that really kind of aligns the marketing activities that we're doing with the outcomes that we're generating. And unlike a lot of the commercial areas where we have a direct sale of a product or a lead that is being generated, we have a much more complex system that we have to measure. And in doing that, using Google Analytics in a way that we can start to bring this together, I think there's a very valuable and rich source of information that we can use to guide our decisions. But I'm not going to kid you, it's not easy. But that's, I suppose, why I'm here in this business and the team that assists me. It's what we do. We help people to make decisions based on this sort of data and to run and optimise the campaigns that they do online. And that brings me to the end of my talk, and so I thank you for your attention, and if there's been any questions, please get typing and I'll answer them. We've got a few minutes left, and as I mentioned before, I'm happy to go over time if anybody would like to hang around. I'll stay on the line until we have all the questions answered, so please feel free to get typing.